speaking of, I advised him that all staff need to have a voice, and he should really consider moving forward with putting together a solid team rather than making everything a democracy. Do you see where I read that?
I do.
Did he, in fact, waver on having a building leader team comprised of both veteran and not-so-veteran staff members?
Yes.
You then end this memo by saying, quote, I asked Mr. Peterson to provide me with a plan, paren bullet points, and paren, on how he plans to reduce the divide. Is that how you ended this memo?
I do.
Turn to Exhibit 9. What is Exhibit 9?
That is update number 2, dated June 12th, 2023.
Okay. So this is, I'm ballparking, about 3 weeks or so after your first update, correct?
Yes.
And I'm assuming, knowing what I know of schools, that this was probably at the tail end or right after the end of that school year.
It was.
All right, very good. Similar questions I asked you before. Did you meet with Mr. Peterson prior to you putting together this memo to discuss how he was doing and his compliance or lack thereof with the PIP?
I did.
All right. Again, I'm not going to read everything verbatim. Let me just ask you this. As of June 12, 2023, did you believe Mr. Peterson made any meaningful improvement on the expectations outlined in the PIP?
No.
One of the things I noted here, fourth paragraph under holding staff to high standards, including improvement plans in place, you said, I also expressed my concern that we continue to consider staff who are not certified for the positions which we are filling. Do you see that?
Yes.
And why was that a concern of yours?
Part of the responsibility of the district office is to create what's called a staff report to the state of Wisconsin. And as we were preparing that, we discovered a number of our staff were not licensed and needed to work on changing that. And in fact, Mr. Peterson was one of those. Those were all, I would say, were fixable errors. The reference here, one of my expectations is as we invite candidates to interview, that we first make sure that they are licensed or licensable in the area we asked. Not to waste our time, not to waste their time, but more importantly, not to forward a candidate to the board for consideration that shouldn't be hired because of the license issue. And we, at this point in time, we still had some issues with licensing and looking at folks that were not able to obtain a license. One of our policy is pretty clear that is not our bookkeeper's responsibility to check licenses. It's not staff members' job to check licenses, but as administrators, board policy, and I can't quote the number, but the board policy states we will only forward qualified, which in my book means licensed, as well as skilled candidates for the board's consideration. So that falls to us as administrators, whichever administrators forwarding the candidate.
You mentioned in your answer that this was an issue with regard to Mr. Peterson as well. What did you mean by that?
As we were reviewing staff members that had not renewed their license, Mr. Peterson was one of those. So at the time of my hiring, he was not licensed as an administrator. Again, very short period of time to get that paperwork into the state, but he was working without a license.
Next page of Exhibit 9. Under the plan to reduce staff, I'm just going to read the first sentence. It reads, "There still is no written plan presented." And you go on to say, "This seems to be an area which Jeff and I disagree on the solution." Do you see that?
Yes.
Were you getting pushback from Mr. Peterson on your directive outlined in the PIP that he prepare, present, and then execute on a plan to reduce the staff divide?
Yes, we didn't agree on that solution. I was expecting a program where we are working on building the culture, working with staff, consistent accountability, those types of things. Jeff did suggest purchasing a staff development program that would work over several years, when in fact, in my professional opinion, we could do that internally if we change some of our other practices. I did get a plan the following day, and that was sent, I believe, to the board and to me, but it was asking for financial support, again, to purchase a professional development program. And my expectation was that we would work as administrators to build that divide, break down that divide, and to build those relationships with them.
And it looks like you added that note at the end of Exhibit 9 to reference that Mr. Peterson did in fact submit a plan, and then you outlined again what you just basically summarized.
Correct.
By the way, did you provide to Mr. Peterson both Exhibit 8, the May 25 report, and Exhibit 9, the June 12 report?
I did.
Okay. Moving forward. Tab 10. You have to ignore the top of this because you forwarded this to me, so I need to kind of go underneath it. Is this an email that Mr. Peterson sent to the school board and to you on September 17, 2023?
Yes.
And I just want to have a little perspective on this. At this time, approximately when did staff report to work for the 23-24 school year?
They had in-service in the beginning of August, 1 day for each staff member. We were at 2 days as administrators, and then they returned at the end of August for in-service days prior to the September start.
Okay. So by the time Mr. Peterson sent this letter, other than the 1 day staff had come in, it sounds like staff had only been in the building for the 23-24 school year for about 3 weeks?
Correct.
All right. And did you, in fact, receive a copy of this email from Mr. Peterson?
I did.
And what, just a little housekeeping, then after you get past the email, go to page 3 of Exhibit 10. It is entitled Plan of Improvement Conclusion Report. You see that?
Yes.
Is this a document based on you receiving it from Mr. Peterson? Is this a document he created?
To my knowledge, it is.
All right. And I want to go through this very briefly. On page 1 of his report, under the staff accountability section, if you go all the way to the end, does he have a check mark that says complete?
He does.
On the area of improvement of instructional practices, at the very end, does he have a check mark that says complete?
He does.
In the area of building professional capacity, does he have that same annotation of being complete?
He does.
Same for ethics and professional norms.
He He does.
So as you read Mr. Peterson's memo or document, whatever you want to call it, that he emailed to you and the board on September 17th, did you construe this document to suggest that Mr. Peterson believed he had completed all of the objectives outlined in his performance improvement plan?
I did.
Do you agree with that, Dr. Kravit?
No.
Turn to Exhibit 11. This is a document with the date of October 2, 2023. Do you see that?
Yes.
And in fairness, would these be about 4 or 5 maybe weeks after instruction began?
Yes.
All right. Same questions as I asked you before. Did this document come about as a result of a meeting you had with Mr. Peterson?
I do not recall if we met. This was as a result of my review of that report we just wrote.
Okay, thank you. And in fact, I think the memo makes that clear. I'll just read it into the record. It says, Mr. Peterson provided an email copy of his improvement plan on which he marked complete. In my evaluation, there are several items outstanding. Did I read that reasonably accurate?
Correct.
All right, and you go through the same areas that we have talked about repeatedly in the last, I don't know, hour or so.
Yes.
So, and I'm not going to have you read this. Did you remain, as of October 2, 2023, did you remain concerned about Mr. Peterson's job performance in the areas noted in his PIP?
Yes.
All right. And at the end, you have a recommendation. You say continue the improvement plan and reevaluate during the first trimester of the school year. Do you see that?
Correct.
All right, I want to look at the note at the end. Did you add this note to the end of the memo?
I did.
And it says, I'm not reading verbatim, but some staff members expressed concern that they felt they were being bullied by colleagues to take a side and protest against the school board members and the superintendent. Do you see that?
Yes.
And staff were sent a memo from you about the district's expectation that they not bully their fellow teachers. Did you send such memo?
I did.
You say, I find that preventive leadership by Mr. Peterson could have helped this. I'm going to read that again. I apologize. You conclude by saying, I find that preventative leadership by Mr. Peterson could have helped the situation. What did you mean by that?
Part of our responsibilities as administrators is when we get in situations where there is a divide, we can lead everybody out of it. We can agree to disagree, or we cause the issue. So preventative leadership to me is leading folks out of that divide. And so whether, I'm not insinuating Mr. Peterson caused these issues or was instructing staff, by no means am I saying he was instructing staff to be bullies, but it's our job as administrators to not let that happen on our behalf, if you will. Let the process play out, those types of things. And so that's what I'm talking about when I talk about preventative leadership.
All right. Turn to tab 12. I understand you didn't offer this, so I'm just going to ask it in a kind of a passive voice. Did you come to learn that the school board sent Mr. Peterson what we lawyers call preliminary notice of non-renewal?
Yes.
All right? Is that what tab 12 is?
It is.
And tab 13, please. What is that document?
That is Mr. Peterson's request for a hearing, request for for the reasons, and also to have tonight's meeting in a public setting.
And you heard my opening statement. You understand that Mr. Peterson had a right to make the request for an open hearing and to request the
Absolutely.
meeting. Did you then turn to Exhibit 14? Did you come to learn that the first page that the board, by cover letter, provided Mr. Peterson with the reasons pursuant to his request of the recommendation to non-renewal?
Yes.
And then if you could just turn then to the last 2 pages of Exhibit 14. Is that a document you signed?
It is.
Does it provide your reasons for recommending to the school board to non-renew Mr. Peterson's appointment contract?
It does.
And as you sit here today, do you believe Mr. Peterson has satisfactorily complied with the performance improvement plan that you issued to him on April 24, 2023?
I do not.
And this letter goes on to indicate the areas, and I would note it's all of the areas. It's every single area or section of the PIP. Is it your opinion that he has not adequately improved his performance in all of the areas?
That is correct.
And then I want to briefly turn to the last page. I want to talk about enumerated item B. And I'll just read it really briefly. It says, Mr. Peterson does not recognize the need for improvement in all of the above areas of his job performance as evidenced by his plan of improvement conclusion report that he submitted to the board via email on September 17, 2023, indicating that he believed he had successfully completed his PIP. Do you see where I'm at?
I do.
Why did it concern you that there seemed to be a disconnect between Mr. Peterson's view that he had satisfactorily completed all of his PIP and your belief that he had not satisfactorily completed any of the areas that you expected improvement in?
Yes.
Why?
I think it demonstrates that we're traveling different paths. When I evaluate staff members' fit with their job responsibilities, if we're not converging on one of those ideas and we're either parallel or going in different directions, that's just not a good fit. It's not an evaluation of competency, it's not an evaluation of anything but that. So when I look at this, it's all right, these standards are set forth, these expectations are set forth, and those are the performance pieces. But if I am evaluating it using my years of experience and training and say, this is where we're at, and he's evaluating it, he has a very different conclusion. Again, that piece is, to me, as important as the other pieces. There needs to be a fit as well. So that's what I was going to say.
Isn't it like the old adage where, you gotta first recognize you have a problem to fix the problem?
Correct. I don't think we can get to a conclusion that's successful if we're traveling different paths.
Now, are you aware of certain statutory deadlines by which the board has to make a decision whether to non-renew an administrator's contract?
I didn't study my dates in January.
Okay. And I asked you that only because, we're in early December of 2023, We've got an entire second semester plus your trimester, so we've got more school to come. Why not just not have this hearing and wait to see if Mr. Peterson can, contrary to his own report, where he concludes he's obtained all, or he's met all his objectives, why not just wait till May to determine whether he has improved?
Well, you hit on the statutory requirement that we have a deadline to meet. So those decisions are very similar to our other professional staff have deadlines that we have to provide these opportunities for a hearing and those types of things. So I think that that's important. I think the more pressing issue in my mind is we haven't been able to see the progress. And again, if we are heading down different paths, it's not as obvious to me that we're going to get there. And so we can't afford to miss those deadlines if, in fact, we're not getting them.
One of the things Attorney Lewis mentioned earlier was the importance of the board in making a decision. I'm paraphrasing Attorney Lewis. She said it way better than me. But making a decision based on the evidence that is presented and not based on anything else, including but not limited to the fact that Mr. Peterson has raised concerns, filed one or more complaints. And I just want to talk to you about that and name it, okay? Are you aware that Mr. Peterson has filed a discrimination against the district?
I am.
Are you aware that Mr. Peterson has filed what we lawyers call a notice of claim, or maybe more non-legal terms, a notice that he has a possible intent to sue the district?
I am.
Are either of those, the fact that he filed a complaint, or the fact that he indicated he preserves his right, or maybe filing suit against the school district, did those have any basis whatsoever in your decision to recommend to the board that the board non-renew Mr. Peterson's contract?
Absolutely.
All right. Within that discrimination complaint, Mr. Peterson has alleged that he is a member of a protected classification, specifically related to what under the law is called sex or gender. Are you aware of that?
I am.
Is Mr. Peterson's classification any protected class whatsoever? Did that play any part at all in your recommendation to the board?
It did.
Do you believe that the best interests of the Raymond School District are served by the board non-renewing Mr. Peterson's contract?
I do.
Those are all the questions I have.
Attorney Haslam, would you like to cross-examine?
I was going to ask, Lori, this is what the witness, would you prefer
I can't hear you.
Sorry. Okay, cross it down. So you mentioned, Mr. Garvey, that your first day on the job, you're writing Mr. Peterson a letter of reprimand. Is that correct?
We began that process. Yes, the investigative report was presented to me by the board president and the board's legal counsel.
How long after you received that report did you write the letter of reprimand and present it to Mr. Peterson? Approximately. You don't have to.
I think it was 2 weeks.
2 weeks, and that 2 weeks.
Attorney Haslam, I'm very sorry. Court reporter is going to have your head if you keep speaking over Dr. Garvey. So if you can wait until he's done answering your question before starting your next question, that will go much more smoothly.
Understood. And Mr. Garvey, that's when your attorney here is examining you, it's more of a narrative format. I'm going to try and ask you that yes or no question as much as possible. I know that last one wasn't just to keep things moving smoothly. So is the reason there was 2 weeks roughly or 1 week between when you got the investigation report and when you presented it to Mr. Garvey Was that so you could review the report for accuracy and make sure it was legitimate?
It wasn't to understand the options the district had.
And in that process, did you vet the report and find it to be credible?
The investigative report?
The one that you, yes, correct. And did you notice, was there anything about it that drew concerns to you, like a lack of only certain people making certain complaints, or a lack of other people being interviewed?
I was not concerned with
Did you notice that the same person appears in that complaint repeatedly over and over and over again?
that. In the report? Or
In the report.
In
In the report, correct.
I'm going to ask you guys one more time. Dr. Garvey, you need to wait for Attorney Haslam to stop talking before you answer. And Attorney Haslam, please do not interrupt Dr. Garvey when he's answering the question.
My apologies to
Thank
everybody. So, when you first arrived at the school, did you take time to meet all the members of the staff one-on-one?
One-on-one in pairs or groups.
During these meetings, did you tell any members of the staff or several members of the staff that you have a reputation for cleaning house?
I don't believe I said.
You never told any members of the staff, not one, not several, just want to get this correct, that you have a reputation for cleaning house.
I don't recall saying.
Do you think that you have a reputation for cleaning house?
I may.
As a superintendent, would you say you're a leader?
Yes,
Do you think you're a good leader?
I do.
Do you think that leading by example is a trait of a good leader?
It is.
Do you think setting clear goals and expectations is a trait of a clear leader?
It is.
Do you think providing timely feedback clearly is a trait of a good leader?
It is.
Do you think that giving your employees the opportunity to succeed is a trait of a good leader?
Yes.
So I've never been an educator. I'm going to ask you a few questions about your day-to-day job. So is this a Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 job for you?
Well, superintendency is like 368 days a year. My employment with the district here is as a part-time administrator.
So how many days a week are you present in the school?
2 to 3.
2 to 3. And how many hours a day on those days are you present here?
Some days in the neighborhood of 14 or 16 hours. I usually arrive at 6 in the morning and leave between 4 and 5 in the afternoon on a regular day. Board meeting dates can go a lot later.
Is your contract for a certain amount of hours?
It is.
It is. And are you allowed to exceed those hours if you like? You just have to meet those hours as a minimum, is that correct?
It's a maximum number of hours.
It's a maximum of hours.
It is.
So what is that number?
No more than 880.
More than 8. So the days that you're here working, are those the only days that you observe employees?
Face to face, yes.
Is there another way of observing the employees that you do? You can tell me about that.
Well, there is through conversation, there, observation happens through communications as well.
So you're referring to communicating with other people about employees to observe them, asking other people how this employee is doing. Is that what you're saying?
Or conferring one-on-one with the employee. Conferring one-on-one with the employee.
So when these,
Whether that be face-to-face or not.
say that again, please.
Conferring one-on-one with employees, whether that be face-to-face or not, I would have the opportunity to have some evaluation.
When you're using a third party to evaluate your principal, and you're asking them how your principal is doing, do you think that maybe undermines his authority a little bit?
I don't understand the third party.
If you're going to one of Principal Peterson's subordinates, and you're asking if he's doing a poor job, or asking him or that person to provide you with an evaluation of how his boss is doing, do you think that that undermines Principal Peterson's authority?
I don't.
So as a superintendent, who do you get your marching orders from?
I work directly for the Board of Education.
And when the board gives you a task, does it come from an individual member of the board or the entire board as a whole?
It is the board as a whole.
Board as a whole. So if you're having a communication with one member of the board, and that member tells you something, are you assuming that's coming from the board as a whole, or do you verify that?
I do not assume that.
You do not assume that.
I understand individual communications are with individual board members.
So if you're going to get tasked, it's going to come from this board, and this board confers in an open session that's recorded most of the time. Is that correct?
Correct.